Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's panel discussion on the future of cryptocurrency and blockchain innovation. This session for Accelerate Her will be an inside track into the future of widespread cryptocurrency adoption and blockchain development. We'll be exploring the innovation and trends in crypto like DeFi and Web 3.0, as well as the many use cases of blockchain technology. My name is Emily Nicole, and I'm Fintech correspondent for Financial News. And today I'm joined by some great panelists, including Kathleen Brightman, co-founder of Tezos, Stephanie Ramazan, Director of Business Development at Gemini, and Aya Kantorovich, Head of Institutional Coverage at FalconX. Hi, everybody. How are you all doing?
Very well, thank you.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. It's a great start for London Tech Week. So can each of you give an overview of your background and how you got into crypto to start with? Kathleen, how about you go first?
Sure. So my name is Kathleen Brightman. I co-founded the Tezos blockchain, which is a cryptocurrency, but also a smart contract platform. My journey and foray into cryptocurrencies is a little bit unique. Basically, I married a guy who was a subscriber to the cryptography mailing list where Bitcoin was announced. And there's a very faithful, unused draft in his emails from early 2009 saying, this Bitcoin thing looks interesting, I should check it out. And so I more or less got into crypto as part of a failure in a war of attrition. My husband kept talking about it and wouldn't shut up, and I had a if you can't beat them, join the moment. But thankfully, I actually think the ideas behind it are very compelling and very interesting. And so I fell down the rabbit hole, but that was like way back in 2013. I sort of jumped in full time in 2015. So I guess that makes me an OG by most metrics, even though, that's only because the space has been around for about 10 years. And in 2018, the Tezos blockchain launched. So I've been mostly working with building applications on top of that since then. So maybe that's what we'll get into today.
Yeah, sure. I like your description of getting into crypto by a war of attrition. It feels quite apt for most of us who started crypto.
It was a precursor to a lot of other sentiments that I felt there and after. But yes, it was a good foray.
Yeah. And Aya, how about you?
Sure. Yeah. So mine isn't nearly as exciting as Kathleen's. I started my career off as a banking and capital markets consultant. Before joining my first startup, I was first hire of a company called Tegas, where we were outsourcing the buy-side analysts at institutional hedge funds. Scaled that team and always had this itch to get into crypto and blockchain. Had the opportunity to join Pantera Capital, where I was on the venture side of the business, working for Dan Moorhead, Paul Varataket, Jerry Krug, as well as Bill Healy. And around 2.5 years ago, we had made an investment into Tagomi, and through due diligence, really fell in love with FalconX, really liked the team, the product, and made the jump over, had this itch to get back on the ground, building and growing. So built out our sales trading desk to now a team of 90 folks at FalconX. So really, really excited for the growth we've seen, not only at the firm, but really, to Kathleen's point, in the industry as well.
And then finally, Stephanie.
Thank you. So I started my career in traditional financial markets back in 2005. And I started in sales, then went into the brokerage trading side of things, mostly focused on equity derivatives. Then I, from there, went more onto the corporate finance side of the fence, working in alternative investments within the family office space. And it was around 2016, and a contact, an acquaintance of mine got in touch and said, how would you like to come with me and some friends and we'll start a bank? And in my optimism and naivety, without asking too many questions, said yes. And this was the first banking startup in London focused on serving corporates in the crypto space. So as we all know, there's a big issue in terms of the actual ecosystem of getting fiat in and out of that space. And I was part of that team for about 3 years, and until the Gemini opportunity came to me around about 6 months ago, or a bit longer. I've only been with Gemini now since March. And the opportunity just seemed fantastic and too good to miss. And so here I am.
Yeah, pandemic hire, me too. So I think that's slowly becoming a bit more of an experience that we're all going to share, but hopefully not for much longer. So given this is a panel on the future of crypto, I think it's apt to start with a question that everybody always wants to know is what is the biggest disruption that the experts are seeing at the moment in cryptocurrency and blockchain? And Kathleen, given that you were there at the very beginning, you probably have the most experience in this area. So what are you seeing at the moment that you think is going to be the biggest disruption to come?
Yeah, so I think what people didn't expect that we've seen, and what I think will continue, because I think that narrows the scope a bit more, is using crypto for play. I really do mean like a sense of play. I think people in this space are drawn to it because it has like highfalutin ideas about how to disrupt finance, but functionally what winds up happening is trading photos of cats. And I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, because the technology itself is actually quite primitive and untested. And so what I think has been kind of the saving grace over the last year or so, as the space has taken off in popularity, has been that it is primarily used for like trading memes and GIFs and all this other stuff. And I think that's going to wind up being its saving grace at the end of the day, is that basically there's been a lot of play and exploration, and very few people can write smart contracts, for example, effectively. And I think it's actually a good thing that most of what's at stake is like kind of a meme economy that has sprung up around it. I think it's a good precursor to what hopefully will be disruptive of the traditional financial services industry, as Satoshi Nakamoto wrote back in 2008. But I think it's nice that the foray has been through things that are abundantly playful, like NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and things that basically look like receipts of photos of memes on the internet.
And Stephanie, do you think there's anything in blockchain that you could specifically highlight that you think is going to be a major disruption there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the potential disruptions are endless, I like to believe, but definitely following on from what Kathleen said, that NFT space, whether you love it or hate it, especially when it comes to the application in digital arts, is something that is really rife right now. Gemini's ecosystem is pretty broad, and one of the pieces of that ecosystem is a platform called Nifty Gateway, which is a platform for the buying and selling and creation of NFTs in the digital art space. And I just find it fascinating how it can actually be so divisive. I was actually at a talk at Photo London over the weekend, talking about are NFTs the new photography? And what was very interesting, the old school people in the room were getting very, very passionate about the fact that NFTs can never, they will not allow it to replace photography or to replace traditional art. And I just looked at it and thought, well, you're coming at this from, in my opinion, completely the wrong angle. I don't think there are many people out there to suggest that this is going to replace traditional art. This is just something else. This is something different. And I think that it's something that will appeal greatly to the younger generations. People aren't so fixed on having a physical piece of art on their walls. And it's okay for millennials and people younger than that to actually have portable art that's, something maybe projected onto a wall within their apartment, but they can pack it up and take it anywhere they like. So I think that's definitely one use case. And then on the flip side, there are so many uses of blockchain that aren't just for fun, let's say in inverted commas, the gaming, for entertainment. And for me personally, I'm extremely interested in the use cases of blockchain, for example, within the remittance space, within international aid. I mean, that's a whole other panel, of course, but looking at the stats, there are trillions of dollars that literally go missing when it comes to international aid. And I'm just fascinated by the use cases of blockchain that are now being implemented into refugee camps, for example, into philanthropic agencies. So, when it comes down to a question of, well, how much money is going to a particular refugee camp and what is it being spent on and by whom? I think once people can really answer these questions and show transparency, that will be a game changer in terms of what people are actually willing to donate and how they donate.
And that actually brings me straight on to my next question as well, because Aya, you manage institutional coverage at FalconX, and governments and refugees and all of the work that Stephanie was just talking about kind of go hand in hand with that. Can you give a few examples of governments or businesses that you think are using blockchain and crypto really well?
Yeah, so I'll actually even take a step back, because I think it's really important to talk about the evolution of blockchain into where we are today, and then like progressively where that will probably in the future. And so if you think about like the layer one of blockchain was because you have new asset classes, whether it's NFTs today or just cryptocurrencies across the spectrum. It could be something else, which include real world assets like real estate, like mortgages. And so the first layer is how do you create accessibility to those asset classes? That includes exchanges, that includes brokerages, that includes the front end of these blockchains, right? So decentralized or just applications, right? For you to access that first layer of the asset class. Now, the second is as it pertains to like how do you continue to basically tokenize different pieces of the world. So if you think about the future, like for us, we think that the future will be tokenized. All real world assets, whether it's stocks, whether it is anything that lives in the ether or internet, will be tokenized. So what does that look like today? It can be art. In the future, really, if you like take it a step further, it could be anything that you spend time doing, anything that takes some level of human creation to do. And so that, you know, for all of that, you will need some level of access, and that's where the blockchain comes in. As it pertains to governments and other businesses using blockchain technology, it can be anywhere from, you know, the pure means of moving assets. So, for example, today, if you're BBVA, in order to move your assets from Spain to Brazil, it still takes multiple days, despite everything being on the internet. It needs to go through a physical clearinghouse. There are different regulations between the two countries. There are manual checks that have to be in place, but perhaps you want it to happen same day. Let's say you need to move assets immediately in the matter of minutes. So that's where blockchain is being used. In the US today, banks are using blockchain for settlement between different entities. And in the future, to all the points that Stephanie made, you know, blockchain is being used very actively, whether it's for remittances, again, movement of assets cross-border, whether it is for aid and tracking. Tracking in general is incredibly important. The US government actively uses blockchain and works with Chainlink and other organizations to track money being moved around for KYC AML and making sure that the Patriot Act, no one is exchanging or interacting with terrorist accounts. And so there's lots of ways that you can use it, whether it's for tracking, movement of money. But really, I think the bigger picture is, you know, taking all of the things that we spend our time and money on and thinking about how that could be tokenized in the future. And then what are the ways that we can access that and then track and store and send. All of the gateways that will be used for that will be like the blockchain of the future. And if you think about it that way, then really every government or organization will have some play in that.
Yeah, and part of that discussion around government involvement at the moment is definitely on central bank digital currencies and how we're maybe going to use crypto in the future to solve some of those pain points that you mentioned about physical clearinghouses and the like. Kathleen, you've got a bit more insight into the way things work on the underlying nature. And one of the questions around central bank digital currencies is whether or not we're going to be using public protocols, private ones, who's going to be in charge of all that development. So I wonder how you see that space evolving in the coming years.
Yeah. Well, so Tezos, the cryptocurrency I helped co-found, has been used for some trials for central bank digital currencies in France, notably. So yeah, I mean, fundamentally, cryptocurrencies are designed with the idea of being a censorship resistant way to transmit value across the web. They are hardly compatible at first blush with a central bank issuing them and monitoring them and using it as some sort of global panopticon. What I find interesting and what gives me, you know, hope about these experiments, and that's truly what they are, as experiments, is that, you know, the velocity of money is a pretty important factor in like maturing an economy. So when credit cards were introduced to the global economy, it changed the velocity of money. The faster money can move, the less you need of it in circulation. Another interesting component of this is that, you know, most money on the internet today isn't truly, you know, representative of what a central bank would issue. Programmable money, however, is potentially super interesting because you can make complex transactions register really, really quickly. And that's kind of the promise of cryptocurrencies. left to their own devices. And it would be cool for, I think, most of society if programmable money took off and if people were able to kind of like make payments faster and if we didn't need as much money in circulation. However, I do think it's fundamentally incompatible with the original vision of a cryptocurrency, which is supposed to be a little bit cheeky and a little bit in defiance of what a central bank would, ideally design. So I think it is good validation of the technology that some of these projects are using public chains. But fundamentally, I think like what's more radical and what's more promising is the stuff that's a little bit cheeky and a little bit off the beaten path, and maybe something that Janet Yellen wouldn't have designed herself. But it is good validation of the tech, and particularly with Tezos, we do like to see people using it. I just find that most of the specs for these CBDC projects do tend to defang the cryptocurrency for what it's good at, and leave in the programmability, which is of course like promising for the global economy, but still not as radical as what I'd like.
Yeah, you raise a great point there, actually, because a lot of what's happening now with cryptocurrencies, as we're trying to put them into the mainstream, is the centralizing of decentralized cryptocurrencies, right? It's kind of going in the face of what these things were created to be, but that might be necessary for regulators to really get involved in the space. And Stephanie, I wonder if you have thoughts on that, being at the helm of a business that really has to obey by those laws and work with regulators to advance the sector.
Absolutely. It's obviously a very broad and complex discussion. But I mean, at Gemini, we've very much built our platform with regulation at the forefront and in mind. And as my boss, Blair Halliday, who is head of UK, wisely always says, when it comes to regulators, it's always better to ask for permission than forgiveness. So, we work very, very closely with the regulators here in the UK, also in the US. And at the end of the day, we're working within, rules and regulations that some of them have been there for many, many decades. So we have to figure out a way where everything can coexist, but the crypto economy and blockchain can still thrive in a way and do what it was set out to do. But we can't just disregard everything that's already been there. There is a system, and it's got to be compatible with that system. And whether that's on a very macro level of how are we going to interact with central bank digital currencies, or how can we make what will central banks do when it comes to Web 3.0, and we're trying to integrate GDPR into these things. GDPR has obviously been really a hot topic over the last few years, but it wasn't built and it wasn't put out there with blockchain in mind. So it's what's the best thing to do? To scrap everything and start again? That just doesn't work. It's inefficient. So you have to find ways of coexisting.
Yeah, because a lot of the conversation at the moment coming from like the US SEC or the UK's Financial Conduct Authority is about how do we update the laws that we have at the moment to accommodate cryptocurrencies while also still maintaining that oversight. And Aya, managing the institutional coverage at FalconX, you're having to work with heavily regulated firms in trying to bring them into this space. How do you see that conversation progressing from the traditional firm side as well as when you're working with regulators?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, everyone wants to get involved in crypto. Stephanie, to your point around NFTs, having sat with a multi-billion-dollar asset manager this week, and they were telling us that they wanted to put an NFT on the wall, as office art. And so, everyone wants to get involved. I think what you're seeing right now in the banks is you only have futures currently across BTC and ETH that's approved for trading. Spot isn't, and employees can't trade cryptocurrency because it isn't approved yet by banks. And so you're seeing different ways in which folks are trying to get involved in a regulated space, whether that's through NFTs because it's art, not finance, or it is in other means and forms of just acquiring. I know, Kathleen, you talked about gaming, let's say Axes, because it, accrues some level of value. On the US side, we're regulated. We work with regulated entities. It's a conversation we're always open and having. And so I think it's all about making sure that you're abiding by the regulation relative to where you sit. And as Stephanie mentioned, always better to play by the rules and ask for forgiveness. And so that's definitely the mindset we have as well at FalconX.
And then obviously today is all about diversity as well with Accelerate Her. And one of the areas that crypto is always having discussions on is how it can be more inclusive of women, because it has a traditionally very male structure. And Kathleen, you're probably quite familiar with this, having co-founded the business with your husband and been around since 2013 in the area. What advice would you give for people working in crypto and fintech on how they can be more inclusive of women?
Well, it's funny because one of the nice things about cryptocurrencies is that it's completely digitally native. And so it's not as though there was a store that was set up and people were looking at you in the face when they kind of got into crypto. It's something where basically the founder of Bitcoin, the first cryptocurrency, is completely anonymous. And so what's happened despite that is that it is a predominantly male culture. And so it's like solidly in that 18 to 36 male upper middle class demographic, which is what we found, which is kind of interesting because, sort of it could have been a good test bed for basically doing A/B testing on sexism in the space. And instead it just wound up being like a very male, predominantly male, very internet driven culture. So it's been fascinating to watch how that's emerged. A lot of the crypto stuff lives on Twitter and Reddit, as Stephanie and I probably know intimately. I first wanted to get all of my girlfriends involved in crypto, and I was like, yeah, this stuff's the future. And I made a very convincing pitch to some of them. And then they entered the industry and they're like, why does everyone make comments about me on Reddit? And I'm like, yeah, you know what? Just buy crypto and just don't sit this one out. Because really what's kind of nice about cryptocurrency culture is that you don't have to actually partake in any of it in order to benefit from its revolutionary qualities. So I'm of two minds about it. I think I started off with this very Pollyanna view of I'm going to be defiant and we're going to buck the norms. And now I'm just let the men argue on Twitter and the women will just buy tokens and forget about it. And that's more or less been my position. But then you meet some women. So I know Stephanie from a conference earlier this year. And generally what happens is the women who do actually sit it out and thrive in this industry for several years wind up being the grittiest, smartest women that you'll ever meet. And so it's definitely a filtering effect that I think is actually really funny. And I take great joy in. So I'm of two minds. On one hand, some of my closest friends are women who work in the cryptocurrency space. On the other hand, I would love to spare them from the misery of actually having to deal with crypto culture. So, I understand it's a turnoff, but it's rightfully so. But there's alternatives if you want to get involved.
Yeah, and Stephanie, I'd ask the same question of you because you've worked both in traditional firm financial services and also now in crypto, so you've kind of experienced both sides of the coin in that sense, but they're both heavily male dominated industries, and I wonder what your opinion would be as well on inclusivity.
Sure. Well, I mean, I have the luxury actually of being able to disagree in certain ways, and I'll give you some context to that. And that is just because Gemini actually is one of the most diverse ecosystems, companies that you will ever find. I'm very proud to say that across Gemini Europe, we are approximately a 75% female team, and that's across all roles, all levels of seniority. And as Kathleen said, I mean, we were talking about this privately before this panel. It's somewhere else that was, the women that we have both met, having stuck it out in an industry, either with crypto or I guess moving on from that finance industry. The women that we both meet personally and professionally now who have exposure to it are just so incredibly interesting. And I think Kathleen hit the nail on the head: gritty. And I would add tenacious and just actually really fantastic people. But going back to Gemini, I mean, they've done a fantastic job about keeping those diversity stats up. There's a huge focus on not just male-female diversity, but all sorts of diversity. In our UK team in London, I mean, it's a very truly sort of London look on the team, multiple cultures, backgrounds, ethnicities. Which for me is just, reflective of the cosmopolitan city that London is. And I'm just so truly happy and proud that that's also reflected in my immediate professional team. And we're constantly working with initiatives inside Gemini to get women, either into Gemini, into the space. We work with different partners to give exposure to the space, an organization called Ladies Get Paid out in the US. I'm working with an organization called Women in Blockchain Talks here in the UK They have a goal to get 50,000 women into the blockchain industry by 2023. So there are people out there with fantastic initiatives, actually putting real numbers on things and holding themselves accountable to actually make change.
Mm. And I'd be interested to hear your perspective as well, because like you said earlier, you do a lot of talking to multi-million-dollar hedge funds, and I'm sure the digital assets teams that come to you through your connections at Falcon X, what is the makeup of them like? Who are the people that are interested in crypto that you see every day?
Yeah, so I would actually say, I definitely want to emphasize what both Stephanie and Kathleen mentioned, because it's really important. The women in crypto and blockchain, I haven't met an industry like this before where there really isn't a woman, at least I have found, that I don't like, which is a lot to say, because I'm very particular. So it's everyone's really scrappy, incredibly hardworking, and really supportive. I would say, I have seen a lot of female interest into crypto. In general, women are less risk averse than men. And so in terms of just like for hiring, I have found it to be more difficult to hire for women, but that is not to say that it's not something that is incredibly top of mind and needs to get done. And so that's what, we spend the time and the resources doing. Another organization I would tap on top of what Stephanie mentioned is SheFi. They're another great organization that helps women get involved. And really the biggest thing is just reach out to women. That there are a lot of DAOs that are women-led for you to get involved in terms of just participating in baby steps with whatever skill set that you have. Really, I have not met a woman that you reach out to that doesn't offer support or connects you to another female group. We have a very large women in crypto group here in New York. There's another one in San Francisco, a growing one in Chicago. And so it is there, it exists. I think it's more or less just about reaching out to people, showing some interest, and then you'll definitely get the connections from there. But there's really, at this point, within crypto, it's a very mature asset class. I think it's very important to talk about the fact that crypto is very much mature. Most of these crypto native funds are now over $1 billion in assets under management. So it's no longer a baby industry. And with that comes the need to hire across the board, whether it's on the creative side, on the marketing side, on the sales side, trading side, and less so on the engineering, which I think most people assume that you have to have a background in. And so really we're hiring for all the same roles across the board, and the salaries honestly are equal, if not higher, than traditional finance. And I really want to emphasize that because I get that question a lot, which is, well, crypto is not as mature as maybe traditional finance. I assume that the salaries are less. That is not true anymore. There's a lot of money in the space and a lot of money looking to attract really great talent. And I'm sure, from Gemini and Tezos, you guys can probably, reference the same thing, but I would really, really mention that as something to be really confident about in terms of taking that jump. It's not that big of a transition, but definitely make sure to get the right mentors and really speak to women in the space who will help prop you up.
Yeah, and on that point as well, Kathleen, what kind of advice would you give to women who are looking to start a business in crypto or in fintech?
Oh, geez. Get good lawyers. Think through if you really want to do it. And yeah, just like be resourceful and gritty. I mean, unfortunately, there's a myriad of issues when you look at the global financial system that could be solved or potentially solved with peer-to-peer networks. Or some sort of novel solution in fintech. Unfortunately, many smart people have probably looked at it before. So your best bet is to probably survey the space really extensively and try to figure out what your differentiator is, whether it's that you have better technology, that you have a more novel insight into the problem. But basically, I would just say this: it's like one of the most well-financed industries on earth. It's hard to differentiate yourself in that capacity, and the way that you have the highest probability of doing it is just by knowing it backwards and forwards. And thankfully, I found many diligent people in my time in finance and in crypto. I have no doubts that there's novel solutions to these hard problems. But yeah, it takes a lot of rigor. So you just have to be prepared that you're going to be going against some of the smartest people in the world.
Yeah, because I think also the other side of the coin is how to join something that's already established. Aya, as you were saying, crypto is not a baby sector anymore, and it's pretty strong at the moment. So what would you give as advice to women who are trying to get their foot in the door in the beginning? How can they stand out?
Is that for me?
Yeah.
Okay, you got it. Yeah, sure. So I can't emphasize this enough on the DAO side because it's a very, very easy way to get involved. And so there are hundreds of DAOs. There's probably too many DAOs, and I'm happy to there's maps of DAOs. Cooper Truly is someone who I use as a resource to understand the DAO ecosystem better. It's a good way to get involved and just start to understand to Kathleen's point, what's an area that you have interest in that you want to disrupt. So there's different stages, right, that you can get involved. You can either join a mature company like Gemini, like FalconX, in areas where you can start to dip your toe and see if that's something you want to get involved in. That's, obviously we're disrupting the CeFi space. There's the DeFi area, so completely removing all of the middlemen across the board. I think, one of the ways that I always recommend is podcasts. I listen really well. I learn by listening. And so Frank Chaparro's The Scoop. There are other Bankless podcasts that I always recommend as resources. There are women-led podcasts as well. Meltem leads another podcast that I highly recommend. And so really just tapping into those resources and learning. Then ask questions. There are a lot of, as we mentioned, mentorship organizations. So if you can ask those questions, you will get answers. And so, I think also on the mentorship side, honestly, it's really easy to get involved. I really want to challenge that. There is a lot of work to be done in the space. There is so much work. We hire 5 people a week, and that's not enough. And so there is so much work to be done in the space. It's a well-financed industry. And even if you're not disrupting something, there are multiple L1s now in which, if you wanted to create something and you thought that another blockchain had a better ecosystem for it, you can partner with that organization in order to launch a very, similar or different product. And so I think there are different ways that you can get involved, whether it's directly by launching your own company, whether it is by launching a fund or a DAO, whether it is by joining a DAO, whether it is by joining different series of companies, whether it's pre-series A, Series B, Series C, Series D. We now have a publicly traded company like Coinbase that you can join. I mean, it is incredible in which the stages that you can get involved, but you can really get involved anywhere, and all of these companies are hiring. So I think it's very, very easy to get involved. While I do think that the, potentially crypto boy club might be overwhelming, I really don't think that's a representation of crypto. I do see a lot of women, people pleaser, or especially on the NFT side, that are more female led. And so I think that's actually changing. And I really would, push to say that get the right mentors and they will help you get involved in this space. No one will say no.
And Stephanie, I wonder if you can lend a London lens to that question as well about, what's the best way to go about getting your foot in the door if you're already working in financial services, but somewhere more traditional, or if you just want to change sector completely.
I think, as both I and Kathleen have pointed out, there's multiple ways to do it. And, Gemini, similar to FalconX, we are just constantly hiring. We've practically doubled our headcount in this year alone. And, the year's not yet over. And when I say double, that's not 20 to 40, that's something like 300 to 600 across all departments in different regions, UK, US, Asia. We now just have a new office in Dublin and Ireland, and the roles that we put out there, we're not going out and saying, you need to have done this particular role or know blockchain and crypto inside out. We are very open, and I think that's the wonderful thing about, again, the sector. There's an open-mindedness about the type of person and also their background, whether that be educational or professional. Gone are the days of, the top tier banks being in charge and every graduate coming out of university and their dream is to work for Goldman Sachs. And no disrespect to anyone who does currently work for Goldman Sachs, but that is not necessarily the holy grail as it was, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. When I graduated, which was about 15, 16 years ago, you went to a startup perhaps because you couldn't go to an established corporate. That is completely different now. There is a hunger to go to a startup, to have this experience where you're going to be really pushed and you're going to be hands-on on multiple departments from the first day, rather than pigeonholed into you're in that department and that is your role, and there's a hierarchy of 800 people above you and you'll just pay your dues and do your FaceTime until till you make it to the top. I believe that crypto and blockchain and all the companies that the ladies of some of them have already mentioned, they're very meritocratic. And, at Gemini, when I'm personally interviewing for people to join my team, or I'm on a panel for other teams, I'm not going, well, sort of, do you already know this? What I'm interested in the person, do you have the capacity to understand this and do an amazing job? And, do you fit the culture? This is what is important to me, and I believe also important to my colleagues at Gemini. It's not, tick the box that you can demonstrate that you have already worked for example, Gemini being a crypto exchange, another crypto exchange, and done X, Y, Z. I've interviewed people who have come from all sorts of backgrounds, not even necessarily just financial services or fintech. And it's a fantastic time in the market now. As I said, everybody is hiring. We're just looking for the top talent, and we decide what that top talent is. It's not done by, an algorithm that is looking at where you went to college or university and just what just what your scores are. It's about, who are you as a person and what can you do? And that for me is really, really inspiring, and I want everybody to know that.
Aya, did you have something you wanted to add there? I saw you celebrating as Stephanie spoke.
No, I can't emphasize this enough. I'm so happy you're talking about that. I mean, this is so important. Like, if you just want to build things and break things, like, this is just the right space for you. If you're hungry, you're scrappy, like, just make the jump, reach out to people, have those conversations. Stephanie, you hit the nail on the head. I couldn't agree with you more.
Thank you.
And then I guess, Kathleen, to kind of bring the topic back to the topic of this panel, we were discussing about Web 3.0 and future use cases of blockchain. And I wonder how you think that we could use those tools to solve this problem of diversity, not just with women in the workplace, but other areas of inequality in society, and where you see that going in future.
Yeah, so I mean, what are cryptocurrencies good for? They're basically fundamentally optimized for coordination games. And I think that a lot of women and, people who are otherwise, subjected to some sort of minority status and, disenfranchised in one sense or another, struggle with coordination games. And that's something that blockchains uniquely allowed the internet to let you to do. DAOs, which Aya has mentioned several times, are decentralized autonomous organizations. They're effectively a way to associate with people who you have similar values to, who you might want to maybe collectively, organize money with in some fashion. They're potentially like great sources for fighting inequality in one sense or another. But more importantly, just getting people who are similarly valued to basically coordinate amongst each other. So that's a very vague statement, but it obviously encompasses a lot of ways to address, hardship in one form or another, and to empower people. So, that's a pretty big part of the Tezos ethos. Basically, Tezos was born out of the observation that Bitcoin lacks a mechanism to upgrade itself. And so what we do in our protocol is we enfranchise token holders to basically ratify upgrades to the protocol. This can be very technical, it can be economic, but it can also be social, in the sense that people who develop upgrades to the protocol can basically invoice the network and say effectively, hey, if you, ratify this proposal, we will get like X many tokens going to this address. And so in some ways, Tezos is itself like a massive decentralized autonomous organization, which is meant for global coordination to solve more intractable issues with the global financial system. So, I mean, that's the big highfalutin, like broad overview. But basically, the TLDR, the summary version is that like blockchains are uniquely good at addressing issues of providing for the commons and issues of basically mass coordination, and that's something that encompasses a large series of ways to address the types of inequalities and the types of hardships that we've grown passionate about in the last few years.
Mm-hmm. And I think like a nice way to end this session and wrap it up would be for each of you to kind of give a version of where you think your own personal future in cryptocurrency is going, because we're talking about the future of crypto and blockchain, but also this is a session about diversity and women in business, and all three of you are really standout leaders in that area. So I'd be keen to hear from each of you on what your thoughts would be on that. Aya, do you want to go first?
Oh man, I was hoping to go last.
Well, we can switch if you want. Stephanie, how about you?
Oh, you, Stephanie.
Would you like me to if you want?
Yeah.
On the spot. So for me, I just want to keep doing kind of what I'm doing, and it's very early days for me in this mission. As mentioned, I joined Gemini in March, and for me, it really feels like I found my home. Having been in finance and then fintech, I think I was in it for not necessarily the right reasons. I didn't jump out of bed in the morning. I wasn't excited. There were moments of excitement, of course, but what I really love about being part of Gemini is that every day is so different, and you just never know what's going to happen. That's the nature of the beast of the industry, and that's the nature of the beast of being with a relatively young company. I mean, Gemini Europe, which I'm part of, is not even a year old yet. So despite the fact that Gemini was founded in New York in 2014, my entity is relatively new. And like I said, I'm very proud of the fact of how sort of diverse our teams are, and I feel very fortunate to have been put in the position and given this role within Gemini. So I just hope that I can continue to bang the drum for women in this space, get more and more people in, whatever their background is, whatever their qualifications are, and just to find the right people. And on a broader sense, I really want to see more use cases of crypto disrupting areas, with also blockchain, obviously use cases, as mentioned, remittance, international aid, something I'm personally very interested in, female microfinance projects. And I think that's going to be extremely powerful when we can start to couple up female microfinance with the blockchain. Will be very, very interesting in terms of the positive impacts that we can have going forward. So working with organizations where perhaps I can add value by bringing that crypto and blockchain angle if they're not already enabled in that space, and also mentoring. I've just got involved with an organization. I've been paired up with a lady in Turkey who has a startup. She doesn't yet have a blockchain element in her business, but she's very, very keen to have one. So I'm really excited about working with her and more and more people like that.
And Kathleen, how about you? How do you see your personal progression in crypto and blockchain in the future, and what do you hope to change?
Yeah, so I mean, in contrast to Stephanie, and I work with a open source protocol, which is fundamentally like anyone can basically be a part of this organization. Anyone can use it. Hopefully, anyone can participate in the governance mechanism around it. So I have a very wide net that I want to cast, and basically anyone who wants to build on Tezos, like I have ample incentive and enthusiasm to help. So just continuing to do that and evangelize appropriately is kind of what I'm all about. It's a little bit different from running or being a part of a more centralized organization or a traditional business, but that also gives you a lot of creativity and a lot of space with how to use your time effectively. So for better or for worse, that's kind of the edge of the volcano I'm dancing on. But yeah, I mean, just continue to do radical things. I think cryptocurrencies are awesome insofar as they can facilitate programmable money. I think the most compelling use cases and the most compelling value proposition will be coming from the things that facilitate that in some form. Today we have mostly GIFs of cats that are flying around on largely very centralized protocols and all sorts of things, but that's okay, because I think we're edging towards something that's much more transformative. And the more we tinker and the more we get people involved in the space, the closer we get towards its promise. So yeah, it's I guess similar ends as Aya and Stephanie, in the sense that we want all the talent to come into this space because that'll make it better. With a layer one, open source smart contract platform, it looks a lot different than a more traditional financial firm.
Yeah, so crypto for fun and also for social good in the end of it.
Why not?
And yeah, Aya, finally for you.
Yeah, it's hard to go after two powerhouse women like Kathleen and Stephanie. But at a high level, I think definitely everything that was said. For FalconX specifically, as we look towards a tokenized future and a tokenized world, is being able to bridge the traditional assets and folks from traditional world to this more tokenized world, and building the bridges really to facilitate that. And so that's really exciting. I think even to Kathleen's earlier point around DAOs. I think something that's really interesting and I'm really excited about is being anonymous and just the ability to be anonymous and create, and what that does for equality. So a lot of the folks around NFTs, and even just I've seen companies raise money where you don't know who the team is, and you don't have backgrounds for the team, and potentially that doesn't matter because the product is still as great as the product is today. And so what does a future with the ability to be anonymous at work look like, especially for equality and accessibility? And then to Stephanie's points around just the ability to really democratize finance and accessibility. I think, that's inherently, I always think, in the US, people struggle to understand the strengths of something like Bitcoin or really any cryptocurrency or blockchain because we're so fortunate to, have a stable US dollar, whereas in El Salvador, 70% of the population is unbanked, and even less of a percent don't have mobile devices. And so that's really where I'm most excited about, is the ability to really have that accessibility on a more global scale. And then what that means for the world financially, when you do have a majority of the population that is able to access financial markets, you will see more money being moved into assets like Dogecoin, but really at a larger scale, like NFT, like creator coins and tokens, like play to earn games. And so what does that future look like? I'm definitely most excited about.
Sounds interesting. It's a future I look forward to seeing. So that's all we have time for today. Thank you to everyone on the panel for joining me, and thank you to everybody who's watching us remotely. I hope you enjoyed it. We hope you enjoy the rest of London Tech Week as well, and that you stay safe.